Good afternoon, everybody. This is Real Talk with Ryan. It is October 28th, and this is our finale of season one of Real Talk. It's been a great season. We've had amazing guests, so many tremendous stories, and so many people doing so much for the community and the people that work with them in the community. And we are honored as our final guest of season one to have Dr. Ricky Shabazz from the San Diego Community College. He is the president of the San Diego Community College. And I couldn't be more excited. I get to work with him with the Black Chamber of Commerce. And we've had so much going on really in the last 6 months with so much relief effort and doing so much good in the community. He's done mentor programs through the university. He's done mentor programs for students and for people. And there's so much to learn from. And so we are thrilled to have you. Thank you for doing this. And we really want to start with, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about what the community college is doing. And we'd love to learn more about what that is. So let's start there.
Yeah, well, Ryan, congratulations on, the very successful programming you put on. How timely is it for us to have these discussions with most of us working remotely or from home? I know I've been seeing an increase in these discussions. And I love being the last because I heard you mention the word community so many times. And what better organization to go last than a community college, right? That word community is embedded in our title. And so my name is Ricky Shabazz. I have the honor and privilege of being the president of San Diego City College, where I've served in this role alongside some of the best faculty, classified professionals, managers on the planet, hands down. I've been in this role since the summer of 2017. So I'm actually in my fourth academic year. I'm in that strange place where I say 3 years or 4 years, but I'm in my fourth academic year, and I am literally living my dream, getting to help first generation college students, getting to help low income students, getting to help formerly incarcerated, formerly military, formerly welfare, formerly I don't have a clue, I need to figure this out. I mean, we admit 100% of the people who apply, and that so very much matches with my own story as someone who went straight to college out of high school. But my mother had me at a very young age, 15 and a half. She didn't graduate from high school. So I was the first person in my family to go to college, took classes during a program called dual enrollment. I grew up in Pasadena, so I took classes as a high school student at Pasadena City College, went straight to UC Davis, played a little baseball, did a lot of fishing. And I like to say that I was the product of great teaching and even better mentors. And so I was very fortunate as a student at UC Davis to be very involved as a student, took advantage of many of the same programs that we offer at City College in terms of mentoring and support and financial aid and scholarships and work study. And I found myself as a senior really wanting to be a professional bass fisherman. That's my passion. If you Google me, you'll see all this stuff about education and then all of this stuff about fishing. And so my goal really was to be a professional bass fisherman. And I did that for 2 years. But as I was a senior in college, I found myself at an award ceremony for leaders. And the then vice chancellor of the school, which was like third or fourth in charge, said, well, hey, Ricky, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm just going to go back home. UC Davis in Northern California, grew up in Southern California. She said, wow, there's a job. Well, I didn't realize the job was not really intended for a 22-year-old. It was the assistant director of admissions. I was like the fifth in charge of college admissions for UC Davis. And they hired me after about 5 interviews. I convinced them who better to help more students go to UC Davis than someone who was a product of the university. And they sent me back to Southern California. And I got to travel around for 6 or 7 years and talk to high school students and community college students about going to the University of California. And I realized right away that this experience I had at UC Davis, many people would never get to have it. And particularly community college students wouldn't get to have it. And I felt like my niche in terms of students who came from a similar background was really situated at the community college. Went around and jumped around a couple of jobs, was a vice principal of a charter high school, realized I love high school students, but I didn't want to work with them every day. Went back to UC Davis and ran their math, engineering, and science program while I was getting my master's degree in education at Cal State San Bernardino, which I wound up moving to Rialto, which is a suburb of LA, Inland Empire, when UC Davis sent me back to Southern California. So I worked from my home. My first job out of college was doing what I'm doing right now, working from home, although I didn't have a wife and an 11-year-old, a 17-year-old, and my mother-in-law living with me back then. But I worked from home at 22 years old. Again, transitioned to a charter high school, went back to UC Davis to run a math and engineering science achievement program, and then took a job at Harvey Mudd College as the associate director of admissions. So my background is enrollment management. I built the recruitment, the marketing to help grow colleges. And when I was at Harvey Mudd, it was a small private liberal arts college focusing on math. So the competition for Harvey Mudd was MIT and Caltech. These were some of the brightest students who actually were encouraged to blow stuff up and code and all of the things that go along with problem solving and science. And around that time, I got a call from one of my colleagues, a friend who used to work for UC Irvine, who had gone and transitioned to Compton College when Compton College lost its accreditation. And so he said, hey, Ricky, come help me grow the admissions office, help me grow the college. And all my mentors thought I was crazy to leave the university system to go to this little community college that at the time only had 3,000 students.
Wow.
Well, long story short, in 7 years, I was able to build a team, and I was part of a team that grew Compton from 3,000 students to over 15,000 students, had the largest graduating class in the history of the school. And I kind of made a name for myself. From there, I was hired as the vice president of students at San Bernardino Valley College. I was commuting an hour and a half, 2 hours one way to get to Compton every day. And I had applied to work at San Bernardino Valley College, which was like 5 minutes from my house, for like 10 years. And I would always get the final interview, but I would never get the job. And finally, they messed up and hired me as the vice president of students. And I did that for about 4 years. And I have to say, my first year as a vice president, I got my butt kicked. I went in there, young college boy with a doctorate, and they just thought I was going to do everything I had done at Compton that made me successful, and I was loved at Compton. And those folks did not want to hear anything about Compton from this young college boy that somebody had made a vice president of students. And so I had to go back and humble myself and read some books. And I read a book called Executive Transition and Student Services. And I remember the chapter vividly. It said, it was either chapter 2 or 3. And it said common mistakes. Well, I had made every one of them. And so I went back to the drawing board and I apologized to my team. Most of them forgave me, some didn't. But I started taking people out to lunch. I started taking people out to dinner. And I started doing something that we all know as leaders. I just started listening more than I was talking. And this magical thing started to happen. People started to show me the same level of love and support that they did at Compton. And along the way, I went to 2 president's training academies and was assigned a mentor who said, you got to apply to be a president. Now, I didn't want to be a president because at the time when I was a vice president, my then president was getting killed by the academic senate. Matter of fact, they ran her off. And I was like, if this is what it means to be a president, I don't want to be one. That was around the same time that I learned about organizational culture. I had never studied that before and how every organization has its own culture. But we brought in a new president and people started to actually learn how to play with one another. They actually got along with this new president, went through my own president's training program, was assigned a mentor, made me apply over the course of a year to be the president of San Diego City College. And I looked up and they actually said yes, and was able to relocate from Inland Empire to San Diego City College. And this strange thing happens. Like, I've gone to San Diego my whole life, but I didn't realize how many people love San Diego. So when it was announced that I was leaving, all my staff was like, take me with you. And really what I encountered at San Diego City College was a very loving family atmosphere that was very different than my first 2 years as a vice president. And I am so encouraged and really blessed to work alongside people who are so committed to social justice, educational equity, changing the lives of students. And for those who don't know the history of San Diego, long before the gas lamp and these high rises downtown, it was not desirable to be around downtown. San Diego City College is 100, I believe, in 7 years old, one of the oldest community colleges in the state, the fifth oldest in the state, in fact. And it was created during a time where most of the folks who lived around the campus were transient, were Black folks, were Latino folks, military. But as downtown has transitioned, and even the college has transitioned, the board, under the leadership of the great Constance Carroll, put $160 million worth of facilities, taxpayer bonds. And so not only am I a new president, I inherit a brand new campus that has been serving first generation, low income, all those things I've already said, Black folks, Latino folks, low income white folks, first generation Filipinos. I mean, LGBTQIA, I could go on. They have been committed to social justice and helping to transform lives long before I stepped foot on campus. And so it was refreshing. That's my story. I didn't touch on fishing. I got an 11-year-old. She's liable to walk in here. I've got a mother-in-law. She's liable to walk in here and start talking some Portuguese. I got a partner who's working on the other side of the house. So hopefully the Wi-Fi doesn't cut out. But that is the quick version of a much longer who is Ricky Shabazz.
Love it. Thank you. This is we're with Dr. Rick Shabazz. This is Real Talk with Ryan. Chat is open. Feel free to text your questions in. I will work them in. I know there'll be a lot of questions. We'll also have time at the end for some live questions off recording. So be prepared for that as we come up. You talked, Dr. Shabazz, about this path, right? And you go into Compton and you do some amazing things. And what worked there didn't work in San Bernardino. And then what you learned there didn't work other places. And then you're picking up different pieces. And I know you're drawing elements from each experience that make you better, and then picking up pieces that you don't learn from just experience that you have to educate. And as an educator for you, how much of being in this administration of managing and running and growing colleges is natural for you versus something you had to learn?
Well, it's both, right? So, our instinctual being helps us discern, or with discernment, I had to learn organizational culture. I knew nothing about that from a research standpoint or from an experience standpoint. I was raised and even mentored and conditioned to believe if I outworked you, if I outstudied you, if I outworked you, then I would ascend. And I think that works to a certain degree. People do absolutely recognize expertise. And so there's a book, The Outliers, that talks about it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. If you translate those hours into years, it's about 4.8 years. And if you look at me changing positions, it's usually around 5 years. So I master something, I move on to the next challenge. And I'm not saying I'm going to move on after 5 years at City College, though. I hope to retire here. But I grew up in a very large, extended family. My grandmother largely raised me, which is the case when your mother has you at 15 years old. My father's side of the family is from Texas. My mother's side of the family is from Louisiana. So I have this very interesting family experience where my family always fished. That's where my love of fishing came from, and why I wanted to pursue it professionally. But in terms of learning, I had a great deal of learning, and a lot of the learning really just came from observing both great leaders and leaders where I was like, I'm not sure that I would have done that. My president, who hired me as a vice president, who I respected dearly, I really observed how not to be a president because respectfully, she had what I would label as a outdated, non-current version of leadership, meaning I have this title, I get to dictate to you what to do. Well, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. It may work in certain arenas, but I don't think it works in today's leadership. And so the relationship side of it, I learned from my family and having a large extended family, and really treating our employees as family, because many of us spend more hours at work than we do at home pre-COVID. Now they've collided, but I remember when I was at Compton, I had, and bless her heart, she passed away a little over a year ago. I had a woman, she was a great woman, Joyce Duran, who was my running mate. I was the director. She was my subordinate, but we were a team. Like, we didn't even look at it that way. We were a team. And I remember she came to work one day and she said, I feel like you're my family. I spend more time with you than I do my husband. Now, at first I was a little turned off to that. But when I looked at it broadly, I had to reflect like, wow, I am working with you 8 to 10 hours a day. We go to lunch, we fight, we get over it. So it was just like a family. And so between my actual family and my extended family, it really taught me how to treat people, and how to build capacity, how to build support, but also how to invest in the whole person, because these jobs are not easy, they're hard. And you begin to realize that there are some people who think they can separate work from personal. And if you could do that, bless your heart. But many of us carry what's going on in our personal life to work. And so why not embrace the whole person, and that people have children and people have spouses, people are taking care of animals, people are at home depressed because there is no one at home,
Yep.
and really getting to know people, right? So most of us are in the people business, whether directly or indirectly. Hopefully that
Yes.
answers your question,
I
Ryan.
love that. No, thank you. It's interesting. You said something that really resonated with me. And we talked before we started today about the economic opportunity and condition of college, and just, the whole degree experience, right? It's highly competitive. You talked about, Harvey Mudd and those severe competition, right, for talent and for people. And you said, we have 100% admit anyone who applies. And so much of education is this competition, but if you can figure out the economic side of it, we'll take that off the table because that's a separate issue. We don't have time for it today, but this inclusive nature of what you do as a campus and giving opportunity, and you match that up against colleges that have this really tight, really stiff admissions and really high costs and really difficult entrance, this barrier. How is that culture of education working, especially for those that are disadvantaged, whether that's a person of color or economic a problem or challenges? What is that, and how does that balance when you've got you on one side saying we're going to admit everyone through our policy, and then others saying we're only going to admit this tiny sliver of the very, very, very select? Best is a different question, but select. That creates a broader gap. How does that culture coexist?
It doesn't. Frankly, it doesn't. I was on one of these calls last week, and I ruffled a couple of feathers, which, we're living during a time that I have just come to the realization that not all conflict is a bad thing. I'm running toward the conflict to be able to have these discussions, but I made the statement that I'm going to make, and challenge me, as did some other folks did. One, I'm a product of a UC education, and if you look at a document called the Master Plan, which was actually authored in the 60s by the then president or chancellor of the University of California, this gentleman got in a room with a bunch of other affluent people and wrote a document that wound up being the roadmap for how public education is going to be funded. Well, go figure. The University of California is funded publicly at about $33,000 per full-time equivalent student. So for the sake of conversation, let's say per student. The CSU, you mentioned you went to CSU San Marcos. CSU is funded at about $14,000 per student. K through 12 is funded about $12,000 per student. And at the bottom, at about approximately $8,600 per student, is a community college. Well, if we admit 100% of the folks that are coming in with learning disabilities, maybe not so positive experience in high school, and the gamut, and then on the top or upper end, the University of California is admitting the top 10%, largely affluent, largely white. And this is not about being anti-white. This is just data. the average Black student, the average Latino student, the average low-income students, first-generation student will never set foot in the University of California. Strictly on numbers, 2.1 million community college students approximately in the state. Well, there are only about 400,000 slots at the University of California, a little bit more than that at the CSU. If all 2.1 wanted to go to the University of California, there are not enough slots. And so I find myself challenging, frankly, a system that produced me by also saying, you know what? I am who I am because I had that experience. I want more of my students to go to UC San Diego, the University of San Diego, San Diego State. But the fact of the matter is that many of them will never have that opportunity. Lastly, we talked about a data point that I'll mention, and that is if you look at the average GPA of an incoming student in the San Diego State, and then you look at the average GPA of a transfer student, and then you track both GPAs to completion, which is graduation, the transfer student will outpace the high school student every single time. And so we have something that, as a researcher, maybe this is the academia in me coming out, something called social reproduction. And that basically is a fancy theory that says that these systems are having the outcomes that they're intended to have, which is they never really intended community colleges to produce such a high caliber student who would outperform a university student. The community colleges really were intended to be a place for training nurses, police, firemen, and people to go straight into the workforce. And we do a great job of that. Is where you start to look at the way that community colleges and universities are funded in this state, that we're perpetuating an inequality that exists. And I could talk forever about this, but that's probably the easiest way to say it.
Well, and I'm a product of that. I mean, I for economic reasons and for acceptance reasons, I went that community college route and got a general studies degree from community college. And then I went to Cal State and I got out, and I know my grade point was better than most everyone else that got out. And so I know that that works. And that was 25 years ago that works. So I can imagine as it's gotten more refined, it's gotten better. Are there substantial changes? I mean, college education is constantly in the news, right? As a topic point of whether it's debt, whether it's you have to do this, whether it's screenings happening at job interviews strictly on the basis of where your degree is and where it's from, which I have a whole different opinion about whether that's right or not, right? But that competition is so fierce. Are there changes coming to the way colleges are functioning to make that a little better playing ground or more opportunity oriented playing ground for people?
Yes. And the public is driving this. And businesses, frankly, are driving this. And there are many businesses, Ryan, that feel the same way, that, you know what, we don't have to have an MIT graduate to do coding. We could teach an 8-week class on coding, and we prefer to train people. And so you see a lot of businesses really challenging the traditional college model. Two, community colleges are now saying, you know what, the same faculty that teach at the community college are adjuncts at the UC and CSU. Why can't we offer bachelor's degrees if you're not going to let our students in anyways? And so my colleague, Dr. Pam Lester over at Mesa College, the president there, I think they've had 2 graduating, maybe 3 graduating classes of bachelor degree program in the health sciences, in an area that's not offered by a UC or a Cal State, and every one of those students had a job upon graduation.
That's awesome.
And the cost point of that is so reasonable. It's actually cheaper than a CSU or a UC, which then is putting pressure on the UC and CSU to say, if a community college can produce a high caliber candidate to go into the workforce at a fraction of the cost, then we ought to be able to look at this and say there's a better way to do it. So the traditional model of college started to be challenged, and hopefully none of my public education friends will get mad at me, but really I can pinpoint this to like the national universities and the Phoenix universities that say, you know what, you don't have to be in a class for 18 weeks or 16 weeks to learn. We can knock these classes out in 8 weeks or 6 weeks and still produce a high caliber student. And frankly, they've forced us to have to change our model. And now you see more 8-week classes, 6-week classes. I teach at the University of San Diego, and I can tell you teaching an 18-week class is exhausting. Students don't want to be in class I don't want to teach for that long. I can teach
Right.
the same quality and produce the same outcomes in less time. So absolutely, things are changing. And I'll tell you what's driving it is this device right here.
Yep.
This cell phone is changing the way we learn. I wish I wasn't on it as long, and I wish I didn't give it to my 11-year-old when I did, but it is actually driving the way we operate.
Absolutely. We started this show 6 months ago to create a platform for people to talk and create the sense of community, because everyone was disconnected, right? And everyone, regardless of their station in life, regardless of their job, is impacted some way by COVID, right? And so this isn't a COVID show, but it was created because of that lack and loss of personal connection and community. You guys are impacted immensely in having to pivot. And we've talked to a lot of business owners about and nonprofits about how have you had to pivot your business? How did you guys as an organization have to take what was essentially no one can come and everything's ripped away, and you've got to reimagine how you actually educate? It's got to be stressful and intense, but what are some of the things that you had to pivot and change to still produce quality education in an environment that nothing was the same?
Yeah. Well, if I said it once, I'll say it 1,000 times. I work with an amazing group of people. So we were already doing a lot of things online, right? So we already had degrees that could be accomplished online, but that was a very small fraction of what we did. But since we had people who had expertise, we were able to leverage that knowledge and that innovation to help people, frankly, like myself, who never intended to teach or do some of these things remotely. So we immediately went to professional development, shut down the college for like 2 weeks in March, and really did crash courses on these things. And we, having a nursing program, a great nursing program at that, and health professionals on our campus help us really navigate the science piece of COVID to say what are risks worth taking, what are risks not worth taking. And ultimately what we learned and what was the biggest challenge was not pivoting. The biggest challenge as a CEO or president of an organization was the reality that my employees, our employees, my colleagues, my family at City College face the same digital divide as our students.
Mm-hmm.
I will probably never order another desktop again, unless it's in a computer lab for students. If all of our employees had docking stations and laptops, we would have even been quicker than we already were.
Sure.
And so we learned many of our employees were doing their work via this device too, because they either couldn't afford Wi-Fi at home, and or they worked in or lived in an apartment that it was spotty at best. So we had to set up drive-through events, not only for our students to get laptops, but for our employees to get laptops and Wi-Fi hubs. And thank goodness, and this president gets a lot of flack, and I'm neither for or against. I'm in the middle. I'm for students. But the federal government intervened with some CARES funds. And while it wasn't as much as it could have been, it was greatly needed and appreciated that we were able to buy computers, not only for students. I think we wound up giving away $2.1 million to students. And we wound up with $1.4 million to buy computers and technology and software for employees, because that really was the biggest challenge, is not that we couldn't teach online, but who didn't have a laptop or a docking station or a Wi-Fi hub based on where they lived or their own socioeconomic conditions.
Love it. Well, I want to leave some time. This is Real Talk with Ryan. Chat's open. Feel free to chat in. You can also ask some live questions here in a little bit, but I want to leave some time for you to talk about the why part of you. And it's admirable to create a culture in the university, in the college, that allows people the opportunity to grow and then go get jobs. And that is all part of it. But I know your vision for what you want to create an opportunity is bigger than just what the education element of college can provide. And I know that you've done virtual men of color student leadership programs. I know that you have mentorship programs that you sponsor, that you mentor through, that you invite other people to mentor in, and we've talked at length about this before. And so talk to us about why you do this, because I know it's more than just it's a cool job at a university or in a college, and I found my way there, but what's in it for you and what motivates you in that community? And then we love to hear about those mentor programs and the Men of Color Student Leadership Institute you put on, because I think it tells us where others can plug in to help people in our community too.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And, I mentioned that I'm the product of great teaching, and I'm the product of even greater mentoring. And someone invested in me, and I should say several people, and we don't even have enough time to name all of them. But someone saw something in me from my ninth grade teacher, Steve Seaford, who used to allow us to write what grade we thought we deserved, and didn't realize he was tricking us into being better writers and critical thinking and waging dialogue and argument. I could just go back through my entire educational experience, and I could have been a statistic if it were not for people of all races, all religions, all genders, taking this little Black boy who was born of a teenage parent. And let me be clear, my father was always in my life. He was in and out of prison, but he was also in the military. And so people invested in me. And when you realize, and you get to the point where you realize that people are investing in you, and not everybody gets this investment, you're obligated to pay it forward. You're forward and backward.
Yeah.
And I remember the woman who hired me in my first job, Leslie Campbell. When I was hired into the admissions office, I got to go back and look at my own file when I applied to UC Davis. And the same woman who hired me for my first job out of college was the same woman who admitted me into UC Davis.
Wow.
And that blew my mind, and the assistance she provided me, and not just me, but anyone who she mentored, stays with me today. And then lastly, I remember she unfortunately passed away several years ago, but she passed away of cancer, and I got to go to her funeral, and I was a little late. And I was late because I had to park 20 blocks away to get to this woman's funeral, and I couldn't even get into the church. And that just resonated with me, that this woman, this person, this leader could impact so many lives. And I'm blessed and honored to have been mentored by probably about 30 or 40 Leslie Campbells. Like we can't even mention all the names of the people who have invested in me, either directly or indirectly. And each one of them, they just made one small request. And that was that I do this for someone else. And so I believe that I'm doing that to the best of my ability. And so that is my why. Anytime the son of someone who didn't, and let me just tell this story real quick. When I was a senior in high school about to graduate, my mother had lied, and I'm not proud of this, but she had lied on a job application. She was a manager at Thrifty's, which is now Rite Aid. And she had lied and said she had a high school diploma, and she had gotten a new district manager who wanted to see her high school diploma. And so I did what any good son would do. I took my high school diploma and I finagled it, and I made my mom a high school diploma so that she could keep her job and not be on the street. Now, I'm not proud of that, but you have a sense of commitment to help those who helped you. And I've been helped so much. And so these male of colors, and I don't want to seem like I just do it for men. Cassandra will tell you I mentor women to all genders, races. If you want to come get some mentorship. Now, the other piece of it is it's tough love. So don't come if you don't want to hear the truth. And the people who mentor me did it with tough love too. And it's one of those things that, if you could use it, use it. If it doesn't apply, and what you're doing, if it's working, then keep doing what you're doing. And so I mentor people. I make time for it. It probably drives my family crazy because I get calls all times of the day, night, and in the weekends. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to give back to the very community that helped me ascend to where I'm striving to go. And then lastly, I just like to say, I went to college and never left. It's a pretty cool place to hang out for 25 or 30 years.
It's so interesting when you talk about the woman who you worked with who admitted you to college and the 20 blocks of parking to get to the funeral. But so often when you mentor, you don't really see the fruits of that mentorship. You don't get that feedback loop. She wasn't there to see the 20 blocks of cars. And so something in you has to drive you to say, I do this because it benefits me, because it feels good, because I have an obligation to do so, without expectation of being able to harvest that fruit and see it and have this positive reinforcement. How do you stay focused on that piece of it for you and not get discouraged when you don't see that? Because it's hard to know how your programs are received sometimes when people take that and leave and you don't really know where they went, what they did with it, where they end up.
Right, you're so right. And I would say, this is a funny fact. I would say 90%, and I probably meet on some weeks it's like 10 or 20 people. And 90% of the people don't listen. And I don't get to be the judge of when they're going to come into whatever growth knowledge that's going to help them. I tell them, look, I'm the messenger. What you do with the message is for you. But I actually have seen people develop who I've had even a small part in their development. An example would be, I tell my vice presidents, I have 3 amazing vice presidents. The expectation is not for them to be a vice president. Presidents make other presidents. The expectation is for them to be presidents. And so a lot of what I do is try to share positive information with people in a tough love kind of way to help them get to whatever place they want to go. And I really do view myself just as the messenger. And so it's not really up for me to see them through the finish line, unless it's a direct mentor type of way. It's really to just connect them with resources that will help them live the dream, frankly, that I'm living.
Well, I know in our conversations you've asked for, I'm looking for mentors. I'm looking for people that want to plug into this program, because you as an individual can't take that message to many. You have to create the facility and the opportunity to connect mentors with students and then to carry them. How does someone who wants to be involved find it, plug in, and be part of that program? Because I know there are so many like you, like me, who want to try to give back in a meaningful way and pay it forward. Where do they find you and how do they plug in?
Yeah, so I'm a public employee. All you got to do is Google Ricky Shabazz, and once you weed through the phishing stuff, eventually you'll find me. But I did put my email in the chat. I've lost count for the number of mentor programs that I'm involved either directly or indirectly through the chamber. I've had a chance the last year to run the knowledge exchange with a couple of other folks, run some mentor programs on the college campus, one called City Women Rock, which is for women's empowerment program for our female students and employees, run mentor programs for males, emailing me. The most powerful thing that I can leave everyone with in the times that we're living in, with the large number of uprisings and discussions about race, which I think are necessary. I've been challenging anyone who is a business owner or over HR, has the ability to create an internship program. There's a huge disparity in the number of low income, Black, Brown, and other college students and the like who have the ability to internship, because they're like me, they got to work. Their families depend on them working. And so a lot of these Black, Brown, and other college students, first generation, low income, whatever term you feel comfortable with, a lot of them don't have the opportunity to be in the space of a Ryan or others. And so the ability to create an internship, and you don't have to connect racially, culturally, gender. It really is about knowledge exchange, them helping you better understand their experience. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it, and them having access to that self-efficacy, cultural capital that you bring to the table as a working professional in whatever field you work in. And I've been encouraging business owners, and I've had the fortune to be in environments with millionaires and billionaires in a literal sense, as someone who's a member of YPO, to encourage individuals to find somebody. And if you can't find someone, I'll find you someone. And let me also be clear, I do not accept when people say, oh, I can't find a insert wherever person, Black, woman, LGBTQIA, whatever. I can't find this person who has this expertise. I'll help you go find where to look to find that person. And that would be one piece that I would leave with the group.
Well, Dr. Shabazz, thank you so much. We appreciate you doing this. We'll have time for live questions in a minute, but you made a couple comments that we appreciate, and that we hope that you continue to run towards the conflict. We appreciate you making a difference, and thank you for investing back in us, because our community is better for it. Our college system is better for it. And I know so many have been impacted by the effort you put forward. So on behalf of all of those that can't voice that express that themselves, I want to thank you on their behalf. And we appreciate having you. And with that, that wraps season 1. Thank you, Dr. Shabazz. We really appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Ryan. And thank you everyone for being here. Appreciate it.